Thank you, Kata. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. You know, this town hall is focused on hearing the voices of women and girls as they explore exciting careers in biology, chemistry, and other scientific disciplines to create medical treatments and vaccines to serve humanity. Young women from the National Girls Collaborative Project's Girls Advisory Board, who you'll get to meet shortly, will ask questions of our role model panelists about college, career paths, skills to develop, finding mentors, and bringing innovation and dedication into the work they do. Tonight, we're joined by an all star panel. Celia Dominguez, Vice President of Chemistry and Drug Discovery at CHDI Foundation. Marcina Mathis, Public Health Advocate and founder of the Nerdy CEO. Jin Kim Montclare, Professor in the Department of Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering at the Polytechnic Institute of New York University. Sharon Chandelle, Program Manager for the Viral Hemorrhagic Fever and Immunotherapeutics Consortium and Coronavirus Immunotherapeutics Consortium based at the Latoya Institute of Immunology. And then Latoya Simmons, Emergency Management Specialist, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So now I will ask our panelists to introduce themselves.
I can go first, if that's okay, Ms. Linda.
Absolutely.
Okay, sure. Good evening, everybody. My name is Latoya Simmons. I'm originally from Ohio, and I lived in Atlanta for a long time while I worked at CDC. And as Ms. Linda just said, I now work at HHS, which is Health and Human Services, in the Office of the Surgeon General. So I'm really, really happy to be on right now. One of my favorite things to do is work on outbreaks. And so I'm happy to talk about that today, too.
Thank you, Latoya.
Okay, I can go. Next, hi everyone. I'd like to thank Linda and the organizers for inviting me to this town hall and all the panelists. I'm really excited to participate in today's discussion. As Linda said, my name is Celia Dominguez, Vice President of Chemistry and Drug Discovery at CHDI Foundation. Just give you a little background of what CHDI is. It's a not-for-profit biopharmaceutical company. We're privately funded and we're focused on one sole disease called Huntington's disease. We have internal programs where we also enable the community by providing various tools and reagents and engaging pharmaceutical companies to collaborate in bringing things to the clinic. My training actually is a synthetic organic chemist that became a medicinal chemist. And people say, what is a medicinal chemist? Well, medicinal chemistry is the skill set where an organic chemist utilizes organic chemistry to design and synthesize molecules that modulate biological responses. So my job is to basically oversee a team of people who actually can potentially discover and develop therapeutics for this devastating disease. On a personal note, I'm here in LA. I love English Bulldogs. I rescued two, Bruno and Peanut, and I love to play tennis competitively. Glad to be here, thanks.
Thank you, Celia. Who else wants to go from our panel next?
I can go next, Linda.
Great.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marcina Mathis. I am currently in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been a microbiologist for the past 13 years, where I study infectious diseases, particularly respiratory illnesses. Like Latoya, I too work at the CDC. And just in recent year and a half, I kind of launched my own company where I assist STEM professionals, those are in career transition, and are budding professionals who are looking for job opportunities in STEM fields. Thanks again, Linda, and all of the organizers for having me. And I'm just super excited to be a part of this discussion tonight.
Thank you, Marcina. Jin.
Yeah, sorry, I'll go. Hi, my name is Jin Kim Montclare. I'm actually at NYU. I'm a professor there. My research focuses on engineering proteins, and my background has started in chemistry. Then I did more biomolecular engineering, And then I came here to start my own career as a professor, trying to make new types of materials, as well as in addressing the COVID pandemic, trying to make tests for COVID. So I grew up in, a little fun fact is I grew up in the Bronx and never thought science would be a career for me. Somehow I'm now training the next generation scientists in my lab. And so you can do it too. And somehow I've made it back to New York as well. And I have 2 daughters, so you'll hear them in the background. So I apologize for the background noise.
Thank you, Jen. Hey, Sharon, let's hear
Hi,
from you.
thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Sharon Chandelle. I am working out of the La Jolla Institute for Immunology. La Jolla is near San Diego, California. I came to San Diego about 25 years ago after I finished my Ph.D. to work on cancer biology, and particularly how cells decide to live or die, which is a really important factor in a lot of different cancers. I worked in scientific publishing for about a dozen years in a company that was based in Britain. I was their sole US employee. And after that, I worked briefly with a young graduate program, helping young scientists get started on their career. And about 4 years ago, I started working with Professor Erica Sapphire on a consortium looking for antibody treatments for people infected with Ebola virus and Marburg virus. And of course, now that we have COVID, almost anybody working in viruses has gotten pulled into that fight. So I am managing a program that is funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, looking to find antibody treatments, particularly for individuals infected with SARS-CoV-2 living in low and middle income countries.
Wow. Thank you to all of our panelists. This is going to be a great discussion. So now I will turn it over to Kelly.
Thank you, Linda. I'm Kelly Reyna from the National Girls Collaborative Project. I'm the manager of our Girls Advisory Board. I'm going to share a little bit about the NGCP, the role of the Girls Advisory Board, and then I'll introduce our Girls Advisory Board members who will be asking questions to our panelists. The vision of the National Girls Collaborative Project is to bring together organizations committed to informing and encouraging girls to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and computer science. NGCP helps to share resources with programs serving girls across the United States and globally as the Global Girls Collaborative. The Girls Advisory Board is a group of young women and girls from across the country from a variety of backgrounds and STEM interests. They provide important feedback for the NGCP initiatives and are offered various unique resources to help them in their STEM pursuits. We have some members here tonight to ask questions to our panelists. I will let them introduce themselves now.
Hi, I'm Bella. I'm from New Jersey and I'm on the Girls Advisory Board. And a fun fact about me is I play basketball, soccer, and lacrosse competitively.
Hi, I'm Christine and I'm from Georgia. And a fun fact about me is that I have a pet chicken.
Hi, my name is Megan. I live in Northern Virginia, and a fun fact about me is that I like to bake and cook.
Hi, my name is Lindsay. I'm from Wisconsin, and a fun fact about me is that I do archery.
Hi, I'm Kayla. I'm from Massachusetts, and I swim and play tennis competitively.
Hi, my name is Meghana. I'm from North Carolina, and a fun fact about me is my favorite area of STEM is chemistry.
Thank you. I'll now turn it over to Renuka, a member of our Girls Advisory Board and the moderator for tonight's event.
Thank you, Kelly. Hi, everyone. I'm Renuka, and I'm a high school senior, and I'm currently based in Lexington, Kentucky. So today, members of our Girls Advisory Board have prepared some really thoughtful questions for our panelists today. So we will open up with these questions. And so first off, we have Bella.
Hello again. So to all of the panelists, what are some specific research projects or topics that you've worked on?
All right. Hi.
I'm
I'll-
muted.
I'll-
I'm muted. Sorry about that. I can start with that. I got into, I graduated with a degree in chemistry. So yay, Makana. I'm really glad to see somebody likes chemistry. It's a great foundation to start with. And then when I graduated, I decided I wasn't sure I wanted to be a chemist all the time. So I worked in a lab that I ended up doing my PhD on a really obscure protein that is produced by E. coli. And when I was finishing my PhD, I ran into somebody that I knew, and he was working on a protein that governed a cell's decision to live or die. And these proteins looked just like each other. And in proteins, often form follows function. And that ended up being the case. And that brought me out to California. So I think what's really fun about science is you never know where connections are going to come from. And sometimes you get things that you think wouldn't be related at all and then end up being quite closely related. And that's one of the fun parts of science, is making connections that you didn't know were there.
I'll follow up. Right. So I was interested in science in general, but it really was my teachers who kind of shepherded me through the sciences and told me that this is something that I could do. I never thought of it as a future. And then I decided to pursue chemistry. That was something that I had an interest in and really loved. And then I got to do really cool research that involved chemistry, like working with protein and nucleic acids, looking at developing miniature transcription factors. And then I got to explore further and then engineer new types of proteins and learn new techniques like directed evolution, who actually was awarded, Francis Arnold was awarded the Nobel Prize in 2018. And I learned all of those techniques. And then I started this job here at NYU. These are things that I really didn't have a clear path on, but somehow people nurtured my interests, and I had really good mentors to help me kind of get here. And I hope to be a mentor to many more next generation scientists like you.
I could go next. I've always been interested in science. So I got my first little science kit when I was about 8 years old. And that got me going. And I said, I wasn't quite sure it was going to be chemistry. I went into high school and had a great teacher in my advanced placement chemistry that got me interested in chemistry. And part of that high school thing was a little bit of organic chemistry, which kind of peppered my interest a little bit in that field. I went into college and I eventually majored in chemistry. I then got hired by a pharmaceutical company to do research in cardiovascular events. And that gave me sort of the path of what I really wanted to do. I wanted to use chemistry, organic chemistry in particular, to help make therapeutics and to help people. So my boss at the time really encouraged me to go to graduate school. So I went and proceeded and got my PhD in organic chemistry. And I then went on to do a postdoc actually at NIH, where I worked in CNS related events and synthesis of various natural products. I then got hired by a company and I worked in cardiovascular again. And I got to work with crystallographers and protein chemists. And we worked on this target called factor A, which is a coagulant, part of your coagulant cascade. And I was part of this team that helped develop a registered trademark drug called Eliquis, which is currently being treated for anticoagulant, and my mother is taking that medication. So, long years, many years took place. It's very gratifying as I went to visit my mother to actually give her the pill that I actually was a part of. Of course, there were many people, but it was fantastic. So, and I love what I do. And many people helped me, as Sharon had mentioned, you had mentors. The person who I worked for at this first pharmaceutical company was a tremendous mentor to me. He was my outside reader in my thesis and could encourage me continuously. And I hope I can be of help for those who are interested in chemistry. And great that somebody said they're in competitive tennis. I love tennis. It's my other passion. All right, thanks.
Thank you guys for your responses. Our next question is from Christine.
To all of our panelists, how have you used your chemistry or biology education to understand and navigate through the pandemic?
I can go first on that one. Once again, hi everybody, my name is Latoya. I actually am not a chemist, I'm more of a biologist. And so in terms of biology, I think what I've used most is understanding sort of that different pathogen like SARS-CoV-2, which causes COVID-19, or E. coli, or some other pathogen that I've worked with, Ebola, Zika. Sometimes I like to think of it as they all have different behaviors and sort of personalities, if you will. And so it's really, really cool to sort of look at these pathogens, learn about them, understand their behaviors, what they like to eat, where they like to live at, how they travel, because many of them don't have wings, they don't have car keys, they don't have, I don't know, a moped or a scooter. They often travel on people, especially if they're infectious diseases. And so for me, I've been able to use that knowledge of these different pathogens, learn more, especially about COVID-19, because no one knew about SARS-CoV-2 prior to this event. So continued reading and learning the research to be able to help people in the States. So part of what I do now is help state and local health departments really try to investigate diseases on the ground, and in this case, it's specifically COVID, and try to help use that biological sort of scientific information, repackage it. So one, we can give information to the general public, which is people like us right here on the call, so that you can make informed decisions. And then two, help the state health departments do things like plan. Planning is a really big deal when it comes to dealing with these pathogens. So we have to plan for testing. And I know one of our panelists is working on diagnostic testing to figure out whether or not people have COVID. Also, something else that I've worked on is vaccine administration. So there's lots of vaccine that are coming about, but there has to be a process in place using the biological information, using the information from the national level and the state health departments to make sure that people have access to vaccine once it becomes increasingly available. So that's a little bit about how I use my background in biology and kind of combine it with emergency management to deal with COVID-19 today.
I can answer, I'll follow up. Right, so while I'm not, my research is focused on making proteins, engineering proteins, and I'm not necessarily a specialist in the virus, my background in chemistry helped me understand what was going on and the molecular interactions between the virus and the cell surface and how it engages was super important. And so using that understanding, we decided to design new proteins that could recognize that so that we can then test or develop new, quick, faster, and cheaper tests for the virus. So that's how it directly impacted, at least chemistry has impacted our work with the pandemic. The other thing that I'd like to share with you is that I have kids who are in the school system, and I realize that you're doing remote learning. And so one way that our group has reached out to the K-12 area is to develop virtual lessons for students like you, so that you can engage virtually with chemistry, biology, and things like that in a more fun manner, so that you're not kind of you're not feeling that it's too overwhelming, and that hopefully you can understand the basics.
I think for me, my education provided a foundation. And when I went to work for Professor Sapphire starting in 2017, I really thought of myself as more like looking at cell membranes, the lipid molecules that surround a cell and proteins that were in those membranes. And now I work with antibodies. But when I started with the Professor Sapphire, if you asked me to draw an antibody and say the different parts of it, I probably would have had a hard time doing it. But I think what a solid foundation in science allows you to do is quickly, integrate your foundational knowledge with new knowledge that you get. And I think, when you have good mentors, they will teach you how to learn about a problem efficiently and quickly so that you can gather the information that you need. I think a lot of scientists, they just, particularly for me, the PhD work was really lessons in how to think critically and how to approach a problem, so that you could get meaningful information that would address some of the questions that are in that field. And certainly we have been able to apply some of the knowledge that we had about Ebola, which is a very different virus from SARS-CoV-2. But yet I think we learned a lot of lessons from Ebola, and particularly antibody therapies for Ebola, and are now applying those to SARS-CoV-2. So again, it kind of goes back to these cool parallels of, how can you learn from one field and apply what you've learned from that field and help somebody else.
For me, I think I'm not a virologist, just throw that out there, or a chemist. My background is microbiology. And with that, like what my experience has been infectious diseases, but basically those that are caused by bacteria, not necessarily viruses. However, with infectious diseases, we tend to always think about their modes of transmission, whether it's aerosols or, droplets, or whether we're touching some fomites. And with that, I felt like that was a little bit important for me to kind of like help realize, okay, and in the beginning of the pandemic, I do remember that was one of the questions of whether or not it was airborne, whether COVID-19 was airborne, or whether it was, transmitted by some other route. And just overall for me, I think it was helpful for me to kind of like guide my family and other friends who probably have like tons of questions, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, like what do we do? And one of the main things is what we're actually saying every single day is wash your hands. That is like one of the key strategies to help fight this, in addition to wearing masks and, and social distancing. So that for me just kind of like helped me, because again, it was hard. I didn't know much about this particular virus. So just the foundation that I did have and the background sort of did help me to kind of guide my family and friends personally.
Thank you for your responses. Our next question is from Megan.
To our panelists, how has collaboration among members of the scientific community changed as the result of a pandemic?
I can start off with that one. I think the answer to the question that I'm going to give is not one that you would expect. I think some people would say, oh, there's so much change going on with how people collaborate. And actually, in my world, in more of the public health realm, there actually hasn't been change in the types of collaborations. There's been an increase of it, definitely. So what do I mean by that? So a lot of times when we're investigating outbreaks, I like to think of them as what you all know as group projects. So if you're available and to comment in the chat, let me see your hand reaction, or if your camera is on, let me see your hand if you've ever worked on a group project and you loved it. Let me see your hand. A couple people. Okay, now let me see your hands if you've ever worked on a group project and you hated it. I see some of the hands on the camera. Yes, exactly. I know. So this is what I tell people all the time. I used to hate when my teachers would be like, okay, everybody, group project time. You know why? Because I would be the one kid that was doing all the work while everybody went to parties and did everything fun. I was the one person doing all the work and I hated it because I'm like, why do I end up with all the work? And so one of the things that I like to tell people in terms of outbreaks and even this particular response, or pandemics even, and even this particular response, is that really it's like a huge group project. And I'm so glad I learned the things that I did when I learned them in group project work, because a lot of it helps me today. And what helped me, not really wasn't necessarily all the lessons from the lessons plans that I needed to get the grade that I needed to get. It was actually learning how to interact with different personalities. And I really, really hold that true to this day, because a lot of people, they're introverts and they kind of like to stay inside and just work in the lab. I used to work in a lab too. And I'm on this panel today because I love teaching and I love talking about science. And they were like, oh my gosh, Latoya talks so much. So I was like, maybe let me go to public health. And so when I went to the public health route, I realized, you know what? The information from the laboratorians and all their expertise, whether they be chemist, microbiologist, virologist, whatever ologist, they all come to the table bringing their expertise for COVID and for any other response that I've worked on, whether it be polio or measles or what have you. So all those experts come to the table. Then you have people like epidemiologists, which is a role that I used to fill. Basically, we look at total populations during an outbreak and crunch some numbers and try to figure out how we can help the population, how we can solve the outbreak, and if we can stop the outbreak from happening based on that information that we get from all the laboratorians and subject matter experts. Then we have people who work in policy, who you might not even think would work on stuff like this, but they like science and they like policy and they merged it into a career. So there are some people who are attorneys who work in the sciences as well. So they come to the field to make sure that everything that we're doing is proper and respectable and legal, if you will. Then we have communications experts. Some people love to be on social media. I'm on there sometimes too. And so some people have decided to come to federal agencies or other departments and agencies and make a career of it. So their job is to take all of that information that all the scientists and experts, all the policymakers, and all the leaders, they take that information and pull it together in such a way that it's easy for people to understand. And then you see the post on social media, you see stuff on the news, and you see posters everywhere and people talking about stuff for COVID-19. So really, a lot of times what people don't even think about is for these outbreaks, there are so many different people that have to come to the table, bring their levels of expertise, and have higher level leaders help make decisions and guide everyone. So with that being said, I don't know that COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 and the knowledge of it now has changed our processes. I think a lot of the collaboration is actually the same, but it's increased because now we have a bigger issue. So we need more people at the table, more experts to be able to understand this very, very new pathogen. So that's my response.
I think following up from that, for me, I have two consortia that I work on, and it brings together scientists from industry, from academia, big companies, small companies, to collaborate together. And I think in SARS-CoV-2, one of the things that I've really noticed is just the incredible pace of the research that goes on surrounding this virus. And every Wednesday, not every, so I try to get up at 5 a.m, California time, and there is a WHO, World Health Organization sponsored call. There'll be like 100 people on this call, listening to research, sharing ideas. And I just haven't, particularly during the beginning of this pandemic, I would try to reassure friends and family to say, I know it doesn't look like it, but I said the pace of research and progress it's unprecedented. It really, really has been. And I think that that's one of the upsides of this, is that just to see how scientists can really come together and put aside desire for profit or professional gain to solve a problem that is plaguing the global population.
I can add on to that. For me, in the drug discovery and development world, it's a multidisciplinary area, so you always work in teams. But what has changed is, instead of me traveling over 100,000 miles a year all over Europe and et cetera, we now have to use what I guess the younger people have always used, which is, Zoom, WebEx, or whatever medium you have, to have all these meetings and really learn that it's important, the tone and how you communicate, because you no longer have that face-to-face interaction, and you want to make sure that things keep moving. And it's really remarkable how all the research that we have throughout Europe and the UK and in the US, that everything is still moving forward, even though they were doing sort of shift work, right? Because they needed to be separate and they needed to make sure that, they follow certain guidelines. And it was really, really remarkable what people can do when you put your mind to it and you just, are there for the science. Yeah. So less travel for me.
Thank you, guys. Our next question is from Lindsay.
So what led you to your field of study? Were you always interested in it, or was it something that you discovered later, like in college?
I can go first on that one. Like many of the panelists, I have always had like an inherent fascination with science and just the function of living things. So I knew without a doubt that my career would be in the sciences. Early on, when I was in high school, I thought I was going to take the pre-med route. I initially wanted to be a pediatrician. And while in undergrad, I had the opportunity to participate in a research project. I was actually a participant of it. And afterwards, I kind of used it later on as part of my thesis for graduating. And I became so, I'm gonna say obsessed, but I really did gain a love for research. And so at that moment, I knew that my route was going to change then to go to graduate school more so than medical school. And once I went to graduate school, and my degree is in microbiology, I just had a love for like bacteria. And there was one particular class, never forget the name of it. It was called The Mechanisms of Bacterial Pathogenicity. And in that course, it basically talked about every infectious disease, whether it's caused by bacteria or a virus. And right then, immediately, I knew I had to go work for the CDC. That was back in 2007. And I think I made my way to CDC in 2012 and have been there since. So that's my love story for science and being in the field.
Yeah, I already mentioned this before. I did like science, but I didn't even recognize it myself. It was really kind of the teachers that I've had all throughout my K-12 journey who was really supporting me. And then experiences working in the lab even before getting into college, and then also in college getting experience working in the lab again. And then that, I think hands-on experiences for me is what solidified my kind of love for science. And then the specialty just, is just what is of interest to you. So for me, it's been support from people around me, and just being open and and letting that in, and then following this path.
Yeah, I had mentioned before that oh, sorry, Sharon, were you going to go?
Go ahead, Sue.
Awesome. That I've always liked science. I didn't know I was going to end up being an organic chemist, evolved into a medicinal chemist. But for me, the big aha moment was when I first got that job. And I realized the power of organic synthesis and drug discovery and problem solving, right? Because you need to make these molecules. It's kind of like almost building, I guess, a house, but you need to make sure that it has certain properties, that it gets into the body, that it doesn't hurt you, that can eliminate it. And that process of problem solving is what fascinated me. And then that guided me into going to graduate school and eventually knowing exactly where I wanted to go. In graduate school, I had friends who they weren't sure if they were going to go into academia or industry, or they were undecided. I knew exactly what I wanted to do with that degree and where I wanted to go. So to me, that was the big, moment. But science has always been, actually, I'm the only person in my family that's interested in science, but it's okay. I'm the odd bird.
I was like Marsenia. I really wanted to be an MD. And that just didn't happen for me. I went down the pre-med path, But I think one piece of advice my father gave me that I always really liked is, I had a great high school chemistry teacher. I actually grew up down the street from Purdue University. And this chemistry teacher thought, well, I'm just going to teach college level chemistry to these students. They can handle it. And he was really inspiring, this teacher. And when I was trying to decide what to major in, I liked science and I liked to write. And so I was thinking journalism or chemistry. And my father said, well, if you think you might want to do science, can I encourage you to do science? Because you can always do journalism later, but you can't go the other way. And I'm so glad that I listened to that, because, when you go into science, there again, it comes back to foundational knowledge. You need to have this knowledge in place. And the irony is that eventually I became a science writer. I do a lot of writing in my job. And so I was able to combine these two strengths together. And the nice thing about science is there's so many different options and paths that you can take, as long as you have, again, foundational knowledge. And so keep on with the high school classes and the college classes, because it's a great career, and I'm so happy that I chose it. And particularly now, I think with the pandemic, I've had family members tell me, it must feel really gratifying to be able to actively do something. And I think that's what's really nice, is to use your education to make a difference.
Thank you, speakers, for your answers. Our next question is from Kayla.
So this is a question for all of our panelists, and we would like to know what a typical day looks like in each of your careers.
I'll start. My typical day is kind of pandemic typical day, which is I work from home. I have 2 kids, and so I then deal with my 4-year-old, try to get her on Zoom and try to make sure she pays attention, although it's so difficult with 4-year-olds. My elder daughter, who's 11, she's got it, not a problem. And then after I deal with all of the classes, I then start work with my lab, with any teaching responsibilities that I have, with we do outreach, so we work with schools and do that, and then collaborations, having meetings with my collaborators through Zoom, and then brainstorming, and then doing this over again, and then advising students, because I have a lot of students to advise. This is for courses and stuff like that as well. And then I get to sleep, but not too much of late.
I'll go next. For me, I guess most of us are working from home. It starts pretty early in the morning, since our labs are really in East Coast and in UK and Europe. So I'm on WebEx pretty much from 7 a.m. all the way through probably 2 or 3 p.m. With hopefully a break for lunch. The meetings are really discussing actual data, reviewing and discussing the results and what to do next. My part is also, because I do oversee and manage scientists, is to actually have my one-on-ones with them and mentor them and solve problems or issues, as well as administrative concerns with regards to dealing with whatever contracts and legal, as well as intellectual property, because in the field of drug discovery, you need to have intellectual property and deal with IP attorneys and file patents and et cetera. So that's pretty much, and hopefully I can have enough time so I can go out and play tennis before it gets dark.
I'll chime in next. I think my day looks kind of like a little bit more like Jen's. I don't have 2 little ones, but I'm just looking at a screen and doing Zoom all day like most of us. But if we were not dealing specifically with COVID and its limitations as far as connectivity and travel, I think a lot of my, I know a lot of my work would require travel, because sometimes, like right now, we're living during a pandemic, meaning there's some sort of infectious disease outbreak that's infecting the whole world, right? But a lot of times what I've worked on in the past is outbreaks, and they're more localized to cities or states or multiple states. And so in those times where there's different outbreaks, like mostly foodborne outbreaks is what I participated in. As far as those investigations, my day looks like lots and lots of meetings, lots of collection of data, quick analysis of that data, especially trying to use some really cool software to analyze that data very quickly and also visualize the data. So there's lots of maps and interactive videos where you can see outbreaks populate across the US to try to track where they're going and try to stop them in their tracks. There's lots of calls with partners. So remember I told you about the group activities or the group projects. So every outbreak is like a group project. So there's lots of phone calls with other sister agencies. So FDA, USDA, people who regulate the products, sometimes with policy people. So lots and lots of calls and emails. And then some travel to the locations to collect samples if necessary, and then bring them back to the labs for analysis. Or sometimes they're just sent. And then sometimes I manage teams and send those teams out into the field to pull all that information for me. So reasons actually went into this field of public health is because I'm one of those people that gets bored really easy. So I don't like for my every day to look the same. I can't stand it. Like I go crazy. So I like the variety. I like the really fast pace. So everything that we do is really, really fast paced. It is not slow. Especially in a response like the one that we're in right now. So I like that because I like challenges. I like to think on my toes and try to problem solve knowing that I'm helping people at the end of the day. So yeah, that's my response to the question.
I'm going to chime in here. Similar to Latoya, I need a change in scenery. And like many of us, we are definitely, because we are working in a pandemic, we are working 24/7. And so just recently I switched into more of a leadership role. So I am working from home 24/7. However, prior to that, I would break up my week. Some days I would go on site to CDC and other days I would work from home. And when I was working on site, that was me having meetings with my laboratory colleagues, having meetings, those group project meetings with other partners. And then there are times where I'm in the laboratory conducting analysis, conducting experiments, and I may go back to my office or my desk, my computer where I'm analyzing data. I have one-on-one meetings I used to have one-on-one meetings with my team lead. Now I have ton of meetings, like from starting at 6 a.m. in the morning and end probably at 5 p.m. or 5:30 in the evening with like some of my employees now who are like scientists and, having to deal with like certain things that they're having to get something simple as getting fit testing. There are those that are working the COVID response right now and they need to have respirator fit testing, it's different moving parts. But I mean, right now I'm at home and sometimes I'm looking at the walls like, oh my God, I need something different. So that's my typical day right now, but I'm sure things will change. I probably will start going back on site to have one-on-one meetings and group meetings as well.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a day full of communication through different modes, be it email and I think especially working with the grad students in my previous job, I learned the power of crafting a brief email. And just the need to get your message across quickly when everyone is so busy, and also thinking about what will this look like on a phone, because they're probably going to see this email on a phone. And so, communicating by email, but also communicating via Zoom and then face-to-face, because we actually are, I am in the lab maybe half the time. And so the other thing that's been cool about this consortium is learning a little bit about database construction. I never knew anything about that, and what it takes to get data into a format that a computer understands. It's super annoying, especially when scientists aren't used to having to present their data that way. So again, I think, my recommendation to you is that look at whatever job you're in as the different the different learning opportunities that can come to you, and you know, what sort of experience can I get from this job and use it to build going forward in your career.
Thank you, guys. Our next question is from Megan.
What are the most rewarding aspects of your career?
The most rewarding thing is knowing that all of these hours I'm putting in, like even right now, if you see me look down, I'm looking at my phone, not because I'm being rude, but because literally that is emergency response all day, like 24/7 all day long. So what's rewarding is even though I'm sitting at this computer all day or on my phone, texting and sending emails or on Zoom calls or WebEx or Adobe Connects or what have you, at the end of the day, it really, really helps me to know that all this work that I'm doing is helping someone, even if I'm not in a clinical setting. I think like Sharon and Marcenia mentioned, I too started off on a biology pathway because I was a pre-med major and I thought I was going to go to med school. And then my path kind of shifted left and shifted right. And it basically, it wasn't linear and it brought me to this place. So even though I'm here in this place right now and I'm so grateful, one thing that helps me stay connected and helps is so rewarding is also to stay connected to people. So yes, I'm connected to my work here using my laptop, using whatever devices that I'm assigned, but I also do a lot of community work, which is things like this. Whenever it's not COVID, I go around to a lot of schools and talk to kids about the proper way to hand wash and really cool science experiments that I could take on the road. And so that helps me to remind me, yes, Latoya, you're doing all this work at your desk, but who are you supporting? People. So even connecting with you all tonight is so rewarding because it reminds me all of this work that I'm doing, all these emails and text messages and all these meetings, my goodness, all the meetings, they all are for something. They're all really collectively, all this work is going in the direction of trying to save people, not only in our country, but around the world. I mean, there's nothing better than that for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's actually knowing that your work is actually going to impact people's lives. Mine is actually within the science and therapeutics area, and knowing that that there is at least one drug out there that I was a part of, and a couple others that are on its way, and then currently knowing that for the Huntington's disease community, that CHDI Foundation represents hope for treatment, and that we've got various things in the clinic and moving forward clinically. So that is incredibly gratifying and emotionally rewarding.
Celia, I just have to give you a shout out real quick. I thought that the story that you shared about, working on a drug, developing a drug, and then actually being able to present it to your mom for use, like, whoa. So
mind blowing, right?
Props, because like how many of us can see our work in actually in real time. So a lot of us have to sit at the computer and be like, I hope my work's doing something good for somebody.
Yeah.
You have that.
It took a long time. It's like 20 years in the making for that to happen.
Listen, 20 years,
amazing, right?
It was worth it. So I have to give you a shout out. That's all. I just want to show love. Yes.
Thank you, Latoya. You're fabulous.
And for me, it's contributing to knowledge. And, people talk, I would think the mRNA-based vaccines are really great examples of the power of basic research and the knowledge that comes from basic research. And a lot of people express concern is like, oh, these these vaccines, they came too fast. Well, all of that work was going on in the background, many, hundreds of people contributing their own little piece to the puzzle that helped that vaccine come together quickly. And although it may have appeared to have come together quickly, it really didn't. It was really, the product of decades of background research of people toiling away in labs to find their little piece of the puzzle. And that's what I really like, is just knowing that, in some small way, you are contributing to the knowledge base and finding things that are brand new that no one knew before. And, I just like it, the analogy of, it's your piece of the puzzle that you're bringing in. And from that piece, the big picture grows.
I agree 110%. I co-sign with what everyone just said. The biggest thing for me is just quite simple, just knowing that I've made a difference in someone else's life. a fun fact that I probably should have shared earlier is that my husband is also a microbiologist, and we met at the CDC in the elevator. And so he and I have very similar interests. We have a passion for infectious diseases. We have a passion for public health, and we also have a passion for wanting to give back. Both of us are from opposite directions of the state of Georgia, but we're from small towns. And we've always just wanted to go back and share information and provide knowledge to those students who may not necessarily have an idea in terms of what it is exactly that they want to do with their career, or just giving them some sort of knowledge of what they could do with, if you major in a science, or if you have a biology degree, what are different professions that you can have with that. And so doing community service, like even such as this forum tonight, I absolutely love, and he loves doing this. We go back to like some colleges and universities and our high schools and give talks. And that's most rewarding for me. And I'm going to speak for him, say for him as well. So we both love it.
Yeah, I'll quickly echo what everybody said. And then being an educator, at least that's a part of my role. It is that to be able to see kind of people start to understand science and then grasp it and then graduate. And I'm so happy to be able to train the next generation scientists and engineers and you know, who are on this platform. So it's very rewarding.
Thank you, speakers, for your super insightful responses. Unfortunately, we're quickly running out of time, so I will be taking questions from the chat. Okay, so our first question is from Nanny. I would love for Marcina, and she said, I would love for Marcina to address how, as an African-American woman in microbiology and someone in a microbiology background, how would she further guide some other African-American who may experience vaccine hesitancy when they might not even usually have been hesitant regarding vaccines?
Oh my gosh, I saw that question earlier, which is a very good question. And actually one of the things that I've kind of been, I've talked to multiple women of color about this, because quite naturally, I understand the hesitancy of it, but I also break down some of the previous public health advances that we've had, not just since COVID, but I had to think about smallpox, which was a huge one that was, eradicated, was it back in the 80s? You got to think about polio, the polio vaccine that we administered when we are born. And we have an entire vaccine series that we are given from the time we are born up until we are adults. And I am telling them, if I like to share with other women of color is that, if we are trusting, we trusted science then, and we see that we have these diseases that have been eradicated for years. We certainly should trust it now. And I think the hesitancy is coming from the rapidness of the development of the vaccine, but it doesn't say that the science isn't there. The data is there. The data shows, particularly who it helps. So I really try to encourage women to do. Another point I like to make is, like, I remember as a mother, I'm a mom, I have an almost 3-year-old. And one of the things that women are getting in their 3rd trimester now is the Tdap vaccine. And that was a few years ago when it was recommended in ACIP. And I actually worked on a study at the CDC that actually helped the study was actually showing it enrolled women who received the Tdap within their 3rd trimester versus those who did not. We're just looking at cord blood sera to see if there are antibodies present in babies when they are born. The study is published now. And then when I saw, after doing that study, this was several years ago, and then now having had to have received that vaccine, it's just like, wow, it comes back full circle. Like, this is something that, that we trust. And, if we're trusting our doctors, and the scientists, the science is there, the data is there. I always just say, trust the science.
Thank you, Marcina. Oh,
sorry.
Did anyone add something?
Yeah,
Sorry.
I just saw a question that I wanted to answer. It says, did you ever feel discouraged being a woman in STEM? I just want to say that even though I have shared you that I had wonderful mentors, along the way, there are going to be people who say crap about you and who say stuff that is not very nice and probably discouraging about what your passions are. What I want to provide you as advice, which I hope to share with everyone, is that, tune down those naysayers. There's always someone who's going to say something discouraging, and I can't stop that, right? But tune up those who are supportive of you, and that's what essentially I did. And even though, like, I'm painting a rosy picture, I'm also recognizing that there are issues right here. And I want you to know that the way we deal with these issues, if you hear discouraging words, is to tune those down.
I think for me, I was at one point, if you all ever do a PhD, the third year can be pretty bleak. Typically takes about 5 years. And the third year, you're in the middle of a dark tunnel and you don't really see the beginning and you don't really see the end. And my thesis advisor said, maybe you might want to just take the master's and go. You don't see that happy. And I don't know if he just maybe understood that would be a very motivating thing, or it was just random. I just went, well, no, I came here to get a PhD and that is what I intend to do. I think I was a little bit taken aback. Maybe it was a wake-up call to say, oh, maybe I need to be a bit more serious about my pursuit. But as Jen said, you are going to get naysayers along the way. I would say, as someone who's been in the sciences now, 32 years, I would say it's so much better now than it was 30 some years ago. And so there have been improvements. There's a lot more women in labs and there's a lot more female leadership. And it's really great to get that perspective of women. I think they have a healthier approach to blending work and life and family together. My thesis advisor, he judged you based on, were you there on Saturday? And I judged myself, was I getting work done when I was there? And it didn't matter if I was there on Saturday, it mattered that the work was getting done.
Thank you for those amazing responses. Our next question is from Emily, and she said, it's exciting to see such a great group of high-powered women scientists. And are there many women in these fields?
I think I did provide an answer for that in the chat. In my field of public health, there are an increasing number of women who are graduating with their master's in public health and sort of flooding the field, if you will. So it's really nice to be able to look around and see more women coming into the profession. It may at this point be women dominated. If not, it's definitely 50-50 and it's really close to being female dominated. I think what I'd like to see more is female leaders. So I think that's the next step. Yeah.
I think you'll also see more, there's field specific differences in the number of women and men. I think, maybe traditionally chemistry, I would have thought as having fewer women, and a field like cell biology as having more. I worked in a lab where I think he trained 2 women in his, by the time I was there, and he'd been a scientist for 30 some years. I think he trained 2 women. So it was, you do get used to working in a male dominated fields sometimes, but I think, you know, especially in the life sciences and public health in particular, I think there's more parity and more, you know, more evenness between men and women. But I totally agree there needs to be more female leadership. But I think part of the issue is that sometimes women, because there aren't as many of them, they get called to be on every committee, on every, you know, and so they can tend to be stretched a bit thin. And sometimes I know for my boss, sometimes saying no can be a really difficult thing to do.
Yeah, definitely in chemistry, organic chemistry, medicinal chemistry, and the disciplines within drug discovery. Definitely very few women, particularly when I first started. I think that's slowly changing. I think the industry is trying to make a commitment, even to Gordon conferences, to having, there's one very big Gordon conference in my field of medicinal chemistry. And there was a huge effort in the last 10 years to push to have almost a 50-50 representation of women in this conference, which was huge because it was my first conference. I was one of 2 women in this conference. And that's usually has been my experience. I sit at a table and I look around, they're all men, white men. But that is slowly changing. So as more women get into science and in chemistry, I think that'll slowly start changing, and it has started to change already. So I think that there's promise there. And chemical biology, to me, I think is an intriguing field. If anybody intrigued to explore that.
I just want to say I'm in an engineering school, and so there's not that many women here. But what I do see is in the student level, I'm seeing more and more women. And what I want to say for you is that, you know, do it. Just continue to do what you love to do. And if you don't see it, be it, right? So don't wait for someone to represent you. You be the one to represent yourself.
I think there's also a lot to be said for making connections and not being afraid to reach out to people. The, you know, established scientists really want to help young up and coming scientists, and you know, don't say it's like, oh well, I'm only 15 or whatever. That just shows initiative. And you know, if you're too afraid, you know, if you're reluctant to reach out to somebody who heads up a lab, you can always go onto websites and find students and postdocs, and reach out to them and say, hey, I'm really interested. We have an amazing young woman in our lab who started in high school. She's now applying to MD PhDs, and she just reached out and was willing to make the connection and do the work and show up and learn from people. And so I think that don't hesitate to make that initial connection. And if you reach out and you don't get a response, keep trying. People are really busy. Their email boxes are bursting at the seams. So keep trying. And also, you know, don't be afraid to reach out to students and postdocs. I think they are often a way to get your foot in the door in certain labs. So.
Thank you guys. I see that we're having more questions coming in on the chat, but unfortunately we're running out of time. So as much as we would have liked to get those questions answered too, I'm sorry that we can't. But I would like to thank all our panelists today for providing us with such great insights on the multiple and exciting career paths for girls in the fields of chemistry, biology, and medicine. I was personally inspired hearing from your experiences and how you have applied these experiences to bettering your community in these STEM fields. And I would also like to thank the members of the Girls Advisory Board for crafting such super insightful questions for our panelists today. So thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Renuka. And I just also wanted to say a special thank you to everyone. My name is Lucas. I'm the Senior Project Manager with the National Girls Collaborative Project. And I just wanted to say thank you so much to Renuka and our entire Girls Advisory Board for designing and leading this town hall. This was an amazing conversation. Thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us today and for all your questions. And then, of course, a special thank you to all of our role models. This was just a wonderful conversation, and thank you for sharing your pathways to help inspire the next generation. I really wish we could continue this conversation for another hour. It was just fabulous. And Finally, last but certainly not least, thank you so much to Linda Calhoun and her colleagues at Career Girls. They're such an awesome partner, and we just love working with them. We did want to announce we're going to have another town hall April 21st in honor of Earth Day. So we hope to see you all again here in just a couple months. And thank you again for joining us. We'll be posting the recording on YouTube, and we do ask that you fill out a post-event survey so we can integrate the feedback in our next town hall. So thank you so much again for this fabulous conversation, and we hope to see you all soon. Have a great night. If you want to turn on your camera and wave to our role models while you exit the room, feel free to turn on your camera if it's not on and give a wave and say thank you. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you so much,
you.
everyone.
Bye.